Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. We're coming up on the end of 2024. As I've gotten older, somehow years have felt simultaneously like the longest they've ever been, and paradoxically like they're over in a flash. I expect that sensation is only going to accelerate as time goes by, but rather than thinking about the prospect of aging and the inevitability of death, let's think about something fun. How about all the freaking JRPGs that are coming out in 2025? Seriously, if 2024 was loaded, then 2025 is loaded plus, loaded EX, super loaded. There's a lot of games. I've broken these out into a few categories. First are the games that we have dates on, even if that date is just the anticipated month of release. Next are the games that are supposed to come out in 2025, but we don't have a date for yet. And then I have remasters and remakes. Yes, some of these have firm dates, some of them are more vague, but they're all remakes or remasters of existing games. And that list is bigger than the list of new games combined. Yeah, 2025 is definitely the year of the remake, and I'm here for it. So, full disclosure, this isn't a list of every JRPG coming out in 2025, just the ones that have caught my attention so far. So if there's a game missing from this list, let me know. Maybe I don't know about it, or maybe I didn't think it was for me and you can convince me otherwise. All right, that's enough of an intro. Let's go. I missed out on the original Phantom Brave when I was younger. I had a pretty strong aversion to tactical games in general, and anyway, this one seemed kinda kiddie. I think at the time I was looking for more mature, harder edge stories like the Xeno games about like killing God or whatever. It wasn't until the remaster of Phantom Brave hit the Switch that I actually gave it a chance, and you know what? It's actually pretty darn great. It's extremely unique in the strategy space. You control the little girl Morona, who has the power to bind spirits to everyday objects. As you go through the game, you can recruit more and more spirits and place them into objects you find in the battlefield. These become your controllable characters. You have a limited amount of time with each before they have to retreat, so time and resource management end up being pretty important. Now with the sequel, Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero, there seems to be even more of what made the original game work, plus a bunch of additions, like allowing a spirit to possess Morona herself in order to change her abilities. I played the demo at this year's PAX West, and it's super promising from what I've seen. It's really colorful and fun, and I've got to say, I'm much more in favor of that sort of style than I was as a teenager. Far less need for edginess as I get older. I also love that it's fully voiced in English, and they even got the original actors for the main characters from way back when, which is honestly super cool. This one is set to hit North America on January 30th, so we don't have long to wait. I'm sure I'll be covering it on the channel, so keep an eye out for that. What do I need to say about Trails Through Daybreak II? Trails is my favorite series, my favorite story. It's got so many of my favorite fictional characters. It's the perfect ratio of plot and character and tropes for me. The Daybreak arc is on its way to becoming my favorite too, with Trails Through Daybreak pretty thoroughly blowing me away on every level. It introduced optional action combat to the series, and while it's not as intricate as the combat in, say, like the East games, it's still a lot of fun and it makes grinding through trash mobs a lot more palatable. But even if you hated the action combat, the turn-based system that the Trails games has perfected over so many entries is fully here, and it's the best it's ever been. You now have complete freedom of movement around the battlefield, and your positioning is more important than ever because it can determine how much damage your various attacks will do. Daybreak II is obviously the continuation of the story from Daybreak, so it is most definitely not a great place to jump into the series, but if you've played Daybreak, this is an absolute must-play. February 14th can't come soon enough. Sorry, babe, I'm busy on Valentine's Day. Just kidding, don't make me sleep on the couch. My back. I've waffled on the Atelier series for a long time now. The only one I've played in its entirety is Atelier Yumia, and I enjoyed it, but it didn't light my world on fire in a way that made me need to play the rest of them right away. Most people swear by the Ryza games, but even the chorus of cheering voices chanting Ryza at me haven't gotten me to put those discs in the console yet. So why did I put Atelier Yumia on this list? Well, first and foremost, This looks like a complete revolutionary change to the gameplay. It seems to be fully an action RPG now, and the fact that this is such a big departure from the previous entries makes me feel like it'd be a good place to just jump in. I can always play the older entries whenever too, so it's not like I'm going to be ruining anything for myself. It also feels a bit more, maybe melancholy is the word. Obviously I don't know for sure yet, but the main character and the world feel a little less optimistic than, say, Ryza, which is interesting to me. I have a feeling there will be at least 1 or 2 more Yumia games coming down the pipeline too, so if I want to get on board with a sub-series of Atelier, now's the time to do it. This one hits on March 21st, and I might even be there on day 1 for this one. Okay, now we leave the realm of relative release date certainty and enter the more vague 2025 realm. Clair Obscur came completely out of nowhere and shocked the heck out of me. If you told me a year ago that one of the best looking JRPGs of 2025 would be from a French company I'd never heard of, I probably would have said, oh, that's interesting. I guess I'm just getting used to non-Japanese studios putting out awesome JRPGs, so that part isn't so surprising. But for a completely new IP from a company I'd never heard of to make this big of a splash is pretty significant. The backstory is really intriguing. In this world, I guess there's some sort of goddess or something who paints, and once a year she wakes up and paints a number. Everyone in the world who happens to be the same age as that number she paints dies. The people have been sending expeditions of warriors to try and stop her, and your group is one of them. It's such a unique and interesting plot. It's really outside of the typical mold of more anime-focused JRPGs that I've been playing a lot lately, so I'm glad there's a game like this coming along to give me some variety. It also seems like it's going to have a really great voice cast too, so I'm pretty optimistic about the story on this one. I don't know a ton about the gameplay, except that it's largely turn-based, but involves some real-time elements too. All in all, I think this might be the wholly original game I'm looking forward to the most. I've been an aspiring Rune Factory player for quite a while now. I think I own most of them, but have I ever actually played one? Well, no. Not sure why that is. One of my favorite games of all time is Harvestella, a game which I'm sure you could argue was at least partially inspired by Rune Factory, so it's not like I'm averse to the sort of gameplay it has. I think Rune Factory 5 was the one that interested me the most, but after hearing about how awful the performance was on Switch, which is the version I bought, I guess I kind of took the wind out of my sails. But I'm willing to forget all that and let Guardians of Azuma come in with a clean slate. This looks even more slick than 5 looked in the lead up to its release. It seems to have the combat you'd expect, along with the farming, so we'll see if they're able to stick the landing on this one. Okay, this one might be barely a JRPG, but the 100-line Last Defense Academy is from the people that made Danganronpa, and I love that whole series, so it gets special mention here. I mean, sure, it does seem like it'll have some strategy-style gameplay sequences, but I get the feeling that that won't be the main focus of things. I could be wrong, but it's just a hunch. The idea here is that some big catastrophe happens and you wind up enrolled in this academy that you have to defend from attack for 100 days. I'll admit, I know very little about the story. I don't know if there has been much revealed about it or not, but either way, I'm keeping myself as in the dark as I can. The Danganronpa games had stories that were so ridiculously cool and over the top that I want to know as little as possible about this one going into it. So no spoilers in the comments. Okay, that brings us out of the fully original titles and into the remakes and remasters. First up is Ys Memoire, The Oath in Felghana. As much as I love the modern day Ys games, there is a certain charm to the older entries, particularly The Oath in Felghana and Ys Origin. The 2D sprites on 3D backgrounds is an aesthetic that I love, for one, plus the combat is super fast and satisfying. This version is based on the PSP and PC release, and it adds a turbo mode and some voice acting for Adol. They're advertising it as a silent protagonist no more, but I have a feeling he's going to talk about as much as he does in the modern Ys games, which is to say, a tiny bit, but not much. Whatever, this isn't the time or place for one of my patented silent protagonist rants. There are also 3 different versions of the soundtrack included, and you can swap between them, which is great. The Ys series has always been known for its music, at least when it was on systems that could produce the sort of audio these games rely on. So getting to hear several variations on the music in this one is a pretty neat thing to have. This one comes out on January 7th, which doesn't give me a lot of time between it and the next game. Freedom Wars has been the game that I recommend to people who are looking for something unique and also good on the PlayStation Vita. Like, look, the Vita has a lot of great games, but there aren't a ton in the JRPG or action-adventure categories that are fully unique to that system. Freedom Wars takes an interesting premise, adds a really good storyline, and throws in gameplay that's the right mix of strategy and action. It takes place in a prison where the prisoners all have insanely long sentences to serve. However, they can get their time reduced by completing missions. This usually involves going out into the wasteland and battling other people. It's a pretty straightforward premise, but the plot goes some places and it does a great job of leading you along. It seemed like this one was stuck on the Vita forever, but now hopefully more people will get a chance to play it. It really deserves to have more than just me and like 3 other people talking it up. It lands on January 10th, which only leaves me a week between it and the next game. January is stacked. Tales of Grace's F is in my top 5 Tales of games. It might even be my favorite. Depends on when you ask me. But it just hit all the right buttons with me. It's bright and colorful, it's got a bunch of really interesting characters and a cool world. Most of that is more or less par for the course with Tales, but this one just really nailed all those trademark attributes almost perfectly. Beyond just the aesthetics though, Grace's F has a much more hardcore combat system than most of the games. It's most similar to Tales of Zestiria, which I know a lot of people didn't like, but I don't think their issues with that game were due to the gameplay. Grace's F is not a button masher by any means. You'll need to learn the systems and take the time to improve as you play. But it's the sort of challenge that actually feels rewarding to overcome. I'm really glad we're starting to see Bandai Namco release these older Tales of entries so that new people can experience them and so that people like me can have a chance to re-experience them on modern hardware. If this one does well, there's a chance we'll see even more remasters, so let's show them there's a market for the Tales series in North America, shall we? Xenoblade Chronicles X has been trapped in the Wii U prison for longer than any other game. It's done its time, it's paid its debt to society, and Nintendo finally saw fit to grant this game parole. I think I've stretched that metaphor to its logical end. So yes, Xenoblade Chronicles X is the only game in the Xenoblade series not directly related to the others, at least not that we know of yet. So some people treated it as though it weren't essential. My friends, that's just not the case. Xenoblade X has the best open world I've experienced in a video game, period. There's an enormous amount of stuff to do all around the world, and your ability to traverse it is an enormous part of the experience. You start out on foot, and naturally that limits you quite a bit. Eventually you get ground vehicles, and a little further on you get giant robots that can just up and fly anywhere you want to go. And it all takes place in this enormous, seamless world. It's one of the best looking games ever made too, and it's on the freaking Wii U. Well, now it's going to be on the Switch, so hopefully it'll look even better. The story was really interesting, though it started to get the most interesting right at the end, when it ended on a cliffhanger that seemed likely to never get resolved. But with this, they're promising more content beyond what was the end of the game, so we might finally get the answers we've been waiting on for years. This one launches March 20th, and I am very ready for it. Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake launched not that long ago, and it's a fairly epic recreation of one of the most beloved Dragon Quest games of all time. That makes it one of the most beloved JRPGs of all time, period. But it was never my favorite in the series. That was in large part because prior to the remake, I had never played it. Still, if you had asked me which old Dragon Quest game I wanted most to see a remake of, I'd have likely said Dragon Quest II. The original Dragon Quest is obviously a classic. It was my first JRPG ever, and it will always have a really special place in my heart. But Dragon Quest II introduced multiple characters and a storyline that was a bit more complex than kill the Dragon Lord. DQ3 HD showed what this team can do with these ancient titles, and that makes me all the more excited for Dragon Quest I and II HD 2D Remake. Man, I wish they had come up with a better title for these games. That is a mouthful. The 2 Lunar games on PlayStation 1 were 2 of my favorites back in the day. A part of that was due to the packaging. Working Designs put together some of the most amazing additions for their games, and it really ignited my love of all the trinkets and whatnots that come in collector's editions today. But the packaging was just what got butts in seats. What really made these games legendary was the games themselves. These are some of the most classic JRPGs. Full-on anime-esque stories with that deeply 90s style that I'm super nostalgic for these days. The battle system was pretty unique for the time. Your characters all appear on the battlefield, and they have to move into range to attack an enemy. In the 90s, I was used to my people standing in a line and waving their weapons at the bad guys, but this series actually made you get into the thick of it and mix it up. The stories are admittedly not as complex as later JRPGs, but when you're in the mood for something a bit lighter, you really can't go wrong with these. The one thing I'm nervous about is they're apparently not using the Working Designs localization. Now, I'm fine with them offering a relocalized script. I get not everyone is a big fan of the loose way that Working Designs brought games over to the West. But are we going to get English voice acting? Are they going to be as charming as they were originally? We can hope, and by this time next year, we should be able to say for sure. Yeah, this is the big one. Trails in the Sky is the beginning of the Trails series, and it has been long overdue for a remake. I'm so glad they waited until now so that it can look as freaking good as it does. If you're among the uninitiated, this is the first entry in the Sky arc, and it stars Estelle, a girl who becomes a bracer to follow in her father's footsteps. A bracer is basically a work-for-hire mercenary who only does good. Estelle is truly one of the great main characters in this genre. She's upbeat and optimistic, she can be moody and grumpy at times, she just has a full range of emotions, and she behaves so legitimately like a teenager, though admittedly a teenager who's forced into situations that most of us never had to deal with. The characters, the music, the story, everything in Trails in the Sky works together in harmony to create an incredible experience. And it looks like the battle system has evolved to look more like the one in Trails Through Daybreak, though without the action option. I'm a little worried about this one if I'm honest. If they don't give this the full English dub and localization it deserves, I will be heartbroken. But for everyone who has been hesitant to get into Trails because they want to start at the beginning but don't want to have to try and play a 20-year-old game, you're out of excuses. Buy this game, buy 2 copies, and give 1 to a friend. We need to make this one a big hit so we get the rest of them remade. Okay, this last section is just a little bonus, and I'm calling it Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Both of these games appeared on my upcoming JRPGs in 2024 list last year, and obviously, they did not release in 2024. First up is the Suikoden I and II HD Remasters. The Suikoden games on PS1 were a breath of fresh air in an age when it seemed everyone was moving towards blocky polygons for everything. There wasn't a ton about them that felt next generation, except that they were full to the brim with playable characters and told a sweeping and mature story about war. Suikoden 1 was almost more of a preamble to 2. It's a super short game that basically wets your whistle for 2, which is everything 1 promised to be and so much more. I'm most excited to replay 2 because, as I recall, the localization in 2 was atrocious, so being able to play it with a comprehensible English script is going to be huge. This one is supposedly coming on March 6th. I'll believe it when I see it, Konami. And finally, we have Fantasy Life I, the girl who steals time. Well, she already stole a year, but who's counting? This is a sort of JRPG light life sim sort of game where you create a city on an island and you can change your job around to suit your needs. It doesn't 100% look like something that's up my alley, even though I think I felt a bit differently about it a year ago. Still, I wanted to mention it here because it made a fool out of me by not coming out in 2024. It made fools of us all. This one I'll be keeping an eye out for reviews before I dive in. If you think I should be more hyped, let me know down in the comments. And that's it. Those are the JRPGs I'm hyped for in 2025. What do you think? Again, let me know if I'm missing any down below. If you wouldn't mind, would you like the video if you enjoyed this? And if you've been watching my channel for a while but haven't subscribed, would you consider subscribing? It helps me out a ton. Anyway, I hope you all are having a good December, and until next time, bye.